will receive 2 electric aircraft come next year. The airline CEO, Mesfin Tassew, has indicated that the 2 planes are primarily intended for tourism activity and will cover short distances for a round trip within a range of 20 to 50 miles. Now, Ethiopian Airlines is the second company to agree with the company to deploy electric aeroplanes. For more on this, we joined this afternoon on the line by Aviation Expert, editor and publisher of SA Fire, Guy Leitch. Guy, good to have you with us. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Yeah, hi. Nice to be with you guys.
Now, when we look at the current technology, or shall I say the most prevalent common technology for aircraft, it's these fuel-based propulsion system. How common are electric aircraft?
They're not common at all. That's an interesting way of starting the interview because they haven't happened yet. So I'm afraid I'm a little bit of a skeptic. But you know what? I think that they're coming, and they're coming sooner than we think. Let me just point out that that Ethiopian is not the first airline to partner with Archer Aviation on these particular what we call EVTOL, which stands for Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing Planes. These are like helicopters. They're like helicopters, but they've got lots of little propellers rather than one big propeller. United Airlines in the United States has already ordered 10 of them as well. So Ethiopians, got a good model to follow.
How different are these particular models to the ones that are currently being used for training purposes, the ones used for short regional routes? Those, I believe, are also electric aircraft.
Yeah, again, they're not fully fledged. They haven't been certified. They're not actually in practice. The announcements have been that United will start operating these Archer Midnight aircraft this year. I'm personally a little skeptical about that. Ethiopian is at least able to write their own laws, so they can write laws that will enable these aircraft to be certified and approved for next year. So I'm optimistic that they'll get them. I think it's useful to understand, though, that they're small. They're only 4-seater aircraft plus a pilot, so they're more like small helicopters. And I suspect that one of the primary reasons that Ethiopian has ordered them as going ahead with this experiment, because I think it is an experiment, is because it's going ahead with the rebuilding of a massive new airport, which is a whole 45 kilometers away from Addis Ababa. So it's looking for other ways to transport passengers quickly and easily between the city and the new airport.
You spoke there, Guy, about the certification requirements and the regulations and standard that are needed. What are these that would apply specifically to the electrical aircraft? And are they maybe covered under the existing frameworks, or will Ethiopia have to put together completely new regulations?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. I'm afraid I don't have a stock answer to that, because there are, broadly speaking, 2 types of certification or approvals for aircraft. One is experimental, in other words, they're still being developed, and then fully certified by the Federal Aviation Administration. Now, that is a massive task. It normally takes 5 to even 10 years to certify a new design from scratch. And as far as I know, the Archer vertical takeoff and landing aircraft are not being fully certified. So that will probably mean that passengers taking them either for Ethiopian or for United will have to sign some sort of waiver or indemnity to acknowledge that they are flying an experimental aircraft.
One question that really comes to mind the moment we talk about electric aircraft are the logistics of charging stations, for example. What type of infrastructure will be required to operate these aircraft?
Well, fortunately, that stuff is now well established. I mean, we've seen Tesla roll out fast charging stations across the world. So it's not impossible, and these Archer Midnight aircraft are able to do 50 to 100 miles. So they will be recharged probably within the space of a half hour to 45 minutes at both destination, at takeoff destination and landing destination. I'm not seeing that as a major obstacle at this stage.
You mentioned the radius of 50 to 100 miles being what these aircraft are able to travel. Could you perhaps highlight for us some of the other risks, the technical limitations perhaps, such as the battery lifespan, weather constraints that these aircraft are likely to face?
Well, absolutely, because although the advertisers will often claim a range figure, those range figures cannot be achieved safely because you want to make sure that you can land with, let's say, well, the rules that have been adopted now specify at least 20 minutes reserve. So, it immediately cuts down a lot of that time. Just in case there's a problem with your landing site, for instance, you can't be forced to have to land. So the current requirements would probably require that the batteries may have to be actually changed. Rather than recharge the batteries, you simply move fresh batteries in and take the flatter batteries out. That is one option, depending on how they use them. But honestly, my view at this stage is that they're going to be more of a gimmick. They're going to be more of a sort of an attraction for well-heeled either tourists wanting to get the sights of Addis Ababa, rather than any effective mode of transport.
So there you go, Guy Leitch, calling it a gimmick, a very expensive gimmick that's going to cost Ethiopia $30 million. In your view, is the acquisition of these two electric aircraft a value for money for Ethiopian Airlines? And I guess largely because these aircraft are going to be used for tourism purposes. Are you with us, Guy? Looks like we've lost Guy Leitch, unfortunately. We'll see if we can get him back because that's quite a hefty price tag of $30 million for these two electric aircraft. He is of the view that it's very much of a gimmick. And as I commented, if it is indeed a gimmick, it's a very expensive one. And I believe Guy is back with us. Guy, I was just saying to our listeners here that this would be a rather expensive gimmick. Your views, is it a worthwhile investment for Ethiopian Airlines? Are they likely to get value for their money?
Well, will Ethiopian get value for their money? The fact of the matter is that Ethiopian Airlines is a tremendously successful and profitable airline. So, it's got the money to spare on these sort of market-leading innovations. And let me remind you that United Airlines is doing the same thing. So, although it may not be direct returns in terms of ROI and value for money, I certainly think it puts Ethiopian right at the forefront of pioneering and market-leading airlines, in the world, and certainly, obviously, it becomes the market leader in Africa. Let me also point out that, in South Africa, about 25, 30 years ago, there was a regular helicopter service between Sandton and what was then Jan Smuts Airport. That was unfortunately closed down by the regulator, but it would be really great to see electric helicopters, because that's probably really what they are, filling that gap these days. It certainly takes aviation to a new level in terms of convenience, because the biggest problem we have in flying is not the amount of time you spend in the aircraft, it's the amount of time you spend getting to and from the airport and then sitting in waiting lounges.
Oh, no, certainly. I think the bane of many of our existence. But as we wrap up this afternoon, Guy, you spoke about Ethiopian Airlines and their pioneering nature. Could success with these initial electric flights perhaps encourage expansion across neighboring countries? Could this be contagious? Should it be a success?
I think it will be. I think that it's still very early days for a battery-powered EVTOL technology. And as batteries continue to develop and as the aircraft become more refined, and indeed, actually, believe it or not, we start heading towards pilotless aircraft for these things, then yes, I think we're going to see them rolled out in a much bigger way across certainly the world, and even across the rest of Africa eventually. But it's still early days yet for this technology. I suspect we're not going to see massive rollout at any scale for the next 5 to 10 years.
A red herring there, Guy Leitch, wanting really to get me on the topic of pilotless aircraft. But let's leave that discussion for another day. Guy Leitch, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Cheers.
Thank you. That's aviation expert, editor and publisher of SA Flyer, Guy Leitch. He takes us to 22 minutes after 4 p.m.
Mix Vibration.